other internees, some anecdotes.
You think I could change it?
Is what we really are yearning for. Just a minute. Anecdotes. So we can't have the sound on. We can't have the sound on.
I'm not fooling with the sound.
Oh, okay. Oh, you know the writing underneath. Sometimes.
No.
What's wrong with the sound?
No, it's just that we're doing interviews here, and if the sound is on, then we have to move, and actually we can't find another place. This seems to be the one and only spot where things work very well.
Hattie didn't interview.
Hattie's getting interviewed, right? You don't want to spoil it. So you can listen but not talk. When we're all finished, I have a release, and the release is very simple. It just says, I give permission for the use of my image and words to be used in the telling of the story of the Americans imprisoned by the Japanese in the Philippines during World War II. So it says, I'm not going to restrict it as long as the material is used to tell this story. Okay?
Did you give one to...
No, I'm going to tell that I found it.
Okay.
I'm Hattie Brantley. I was an Army nurse serving in the Philippines when the war started, World War II. And our group of nurses was immediately sent to Bataan to open a field hospital, and we ran it from December until the following May, and it was sort of things were restricted. We didn't have enough medicines, and we didn't have. The only thing we had plenty of was sick and wounded.
Oh, I wasn't listening, so.
You can go on to tell how you got to Santo Tomas.
Excuse me. I was serving in the Philippines at Fort William McKinley, and when the war started, we were sent into Manila to open hospitals in public buildings, and I was assigned to highlight. It's an indoor ball game that they play in the tropics, and I was assigned there, and we set up beds. We got cots. Cots were brought in from, they had been stored since World War I, and we set them up, and then we had a 300-bed unit ready to receive patients. And I was in charge of that and had several nurses working with me, but we never admitted a patient because they were going to be injured. We assumed there would be a lot of injuries in Manila, and we would get to take care of these people. And it so happened that there weren't that many injuries, and but they did send some of the injured from Clark Field that had been bombed the first day of the war. And these people were, some of them were very badly injured, and they sent some of those people down there for us to open our hospital. Our hospital was open at this time, and we admitted them and took care of them. There was a shortage of everything. There was no medicine, there was no dressings, there was just a little bit of this and that, you know, and the only thing we had plenty of was injuries and sick people. And of course we had very few doctors. Doctors there were assigned to by insurance companies, and they were American doctors who were working out there and had been assigned as directors of some of the exterior insurance companies. And I remember Dr. Fletcher. He was an older man, you know, an old-fashioned doctor. And we had one Filipino doctor, as I recall, and these people were assigned to whatever, you know, take care, and they were willing and able. And as I said, we didn't have any supplies, or many supplies, and medicine in those days. Of course, this was before penicillin, and the miracle drug in those days was sulfanilamide or sulfarizole, and so many people were allergic to that. It would be if they were required to take it if they had to have it administered. They would break out in a rash or be real sick from taking it, but they did. It was the only medicine we had really. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Is it
I'm
on?
going to do, as you continue, I'm going to go and get you a glass of ice water. How would that be?
Thank you, that'd be good.
Oh, Bonnie, also, the light is getting a little worse. Just
Oh,
because
is it? The sun is moving?
You can continue.
On the 23rd of December, 41, we had the officers call. Our commanding officer said tomorrow you wear your duty uniforms. We're going by bus to Bataan and set up a hospital to take care of the wounded. So, sure enough, it was on Christmas Eve, and we are wearing our white duty uniforms, and the things this was poplin starched, heavily starched, real stiff uniforms. And we were supposed to gather at 7 o'clock, be ready to get on the buses and go to Bataan. And most of us had never heard of Bataan. We had no idea what it was. But we were gathered together and got on the buses. And this was, we went in a convoy of yellow buses. And as we snaked out of the city, of course the Japanese were bombing Manila, and they could see this convoy going out of the yellow buses, and they would bomb us. So we'd get out of the buses and lie on the ground because it was a little bit safer. And by the time we got to Bataan, we looked like pretty gruesome, dirty white uniforms that had once been white, but they were no longer white. And it took all day to go to Bataan. It's not all that far, but because of the traffic and so forth and the inadequate transportation, we were being taken to Bataan, and we did get there late in the afternoon. And a group of Air Corps officers were there to meet us, and they took one look at us, and they went and got some of their fatigues and brought us. They were all size 42. These yellow, these old drab green fatigues, and as I said, they were size 42. And one little girl weighed 98 pounds, and when she put in these things, we didn't see her for another 30 minutes. She got lost. Thank you very much.
I brought you one too. Thank you. And then you can hold it, or you can put it on.
Yes. So things, of course, went from bad to worse. Now we had clothes and GI shoes. They gave us GI shoes, and our chief nurse said, for the first time in her life, her feet didn't hurt. They were really comfortable. We had those thick thin socks that were underneath them. And I'm sorry, my throat. I may not be talking loud enough, but I'm doing the best I can. So she said, for the first time in her life, her feet didn't hurt. We had these GI shoes and these drab green coveralls, all size 42. And no matter how big you were or how small you were, one little girl weighed 98 pounds, and we didn't find her for a couple of days because she put these things on and we couldn't find her. It was really very an experience, and of course we didn't know what we were in for, but we realized it was a pretty serious situation. And this hospital was, it was an old Philippine Army training ground, just old open barracks that were long. We went in the warehouse there and dug out cots. They had been packed in 1918 newspaper, old and rusty. I saw it myself, 1918. And we dragged these cots out, and we set up about 80 beds in each one of these barracks. And that was our hospital #1. It was called Field Hospital #1. And we had, Colonel Duckworth was our commanding officer, and he had been my commanding officer at Fort William McKinney, and that was okay, we knew him. And he didn't, he directed us, but he didn't, he assigned everybody to work, and we had a chief nurse. Our chief nurse was, we'd had her, she had been our friend at Fort McKinney before we were out there, so Colonel Peg O'Neill was her name. She was really a jewel. And she wasn't all that strict. I mean, she didn't expect us to do the impossible, but we did a lot of things that were impossible, like going on duty and working we worked 12 hours on duty, from 7 in the morning till 7 at night. And then it was too dark to work. You know, if it was too dark, you just couldn't do anything because we had no artificial lighting whatsoever. It was just all it was just as it was. And we had a few lanterns, and if we had flashlights, we had the batteries were in short supply. So it was pretty bad. But we set up Field Hospital #1 and received patients. We had the old Corregidor 10 building that we set up the nurses running the surgery in, and the patients would be brought in by ambulance off of, from the battlefield and taken to this Corregidor building with surgery admit here. And if they would just triage them and see which one needed it worst and which one could maybe survive. And they took them to, I mean, they went through surgery, and whatever could be done for them was done. And then they brought them to our wards, and it was just sort of a desperate situation. We felt that, you know, I will do what I have to do, but how much good is it going to do? And it's just maybe not going to do any good at all. But we did the best we could, and with the doctors we had very excellent doctors, and they would give the orders what was to be done. And of course, so many bones were broken, and they put them in casts, you know. And of course, with casts are uncomfortable, and you have to wait a while and let them get dry. And as I said, we worked from dark until daylight.
Did you, yes, you probably were too tired and too busy, but did you think about where is this going? When is this going to be over?
We didn't have time to think. It was just take care of this, and we were so concerned about the injured that, you know, taking care of them right then, that we would, once in a while, we had a little time to sit and talk. Well, where is this going to end? You know, what's going to happen to us? Here it is, almost Christmas, and we're out here in the wood, in the jungle, and wonder what is going to happen. But we weren't questioning it. We were just commenting about it because we were taught to do our duty, and we knew we were there to take care of patients, whatever was best that we could do for them, and we would just carry on and do our best for the patients. And this is what we kept trying to do our best for the patient, and hope that it was would produce return to health, you know, or at least activity. And
how long before the surrender on Bataan were the nurses carried to Corregidor?
We didn't go to Corregidor until the night of the 8th of June, you know, June the 9th, Bataan fell, right? No, April the 9th. Bataan fell on April the 9th. And we were taken to Corregidor the night before. I mean, it was just a question of getting out by the skin of your teeth, because they just decided at that time, you know, that they had to evacuate us and get us out of there because the Japs were coming. And, you know, of course we'd heard about what happened in Hong Kong and Beijing and so forth. And was it Beijing? Not Beijing.
Nanking.
Nanking, yeah. And so they were just trying to get us out of there before the Japanese came in. And so it was the night before, it was the night of, did I say April 9th? April 9th.
Right.
On the night
before.
April 8th, Commander called us together, and he said, girls, take what you can carry in your hands and get on this bus. And so, of course, most of us didn't try to go back and get anything else. We had this little also canvas musette bags, and most of us had one of those. You just hung it over your shoulder, and it didn't hold very much, but we didn't think about taking extra stuff because there wasn't much available, but we took what you could, and we tried to take our lipstick if we had one left. That's an important item for women, you know. So we got on the bus, and as we were going down the peninsula, the Americans were coming forward. They were being sent north to meet the Japanese. And of course it was blackout and very few lights, and just whatever lights could be used on the vehicles that were on. And it was just like, it was just like the end of the world. You couldn't believe that it was so dark and so eerie, you know, and dust, the air was just full of dust. It was like you were in a cloud because you couldn't see. Visibility was limited. And so we got all the way to the end of the peninsula, which is called Mariveles. We got there, and we said, how are we going to get across? You know, get there. Oh, they'll be shipped in there'll be a boat. And sure enough, there were some rowboats and so forth. And let's see, what do you call them? I don't know much about ships.
Bancas? Were they Philippine boats?
No, we had one that was pretty big. It was an inter-island transit boat.
Very.
Ferry. And they took us on that, and we were loaded onto that, and then taken to Corregidor, and it took most of the night. It was almost daylight when we got there, and we landed on Corregidor, and there were some steps. You know, we had to get up the steps into the soft, to the sandy shore, and I really don't know whether they took us, whether we walked up the hill or if they had transportation. I doubt they had much transportation, but we were taken up the hill to Corregidor was a hospital in the tunnel. Tunnels had been built through the rock of Corregidor in 1911. The number was still over the entrance, and I remember that so distinctly, built in 1911. And we said some of the original cockroaches and bedbugs were still there because there were a lot of vermin. It was very much infested. Corregidor, of course, is safe. It's fairly safe because it's in a tunnel. The hospital's in the tunnel, and the patients are in the tunnel, which was built through the rock, you know. And it was like they'd have an open area, and each one of these tunnels had a name, you know, and then of course they were assigned as wards. Well, I had Ward 7, I think, which doesn't matter, but it was a lot of, we had several patients, about 35 to 40 patients, and one ward officer, and the patients that were assigned to that ward. And of course it was surgical patients. And I was responsible for them, and of course some younger nurses were assigned. I was head nurse on the ward, and we had wonderful corpsmen. The corpsmen were dedicated as they could be. The only thing that if they wanted to smoke, they had to go outside. You know, they couldn't smoke in the tunnel. And let me go outside. I want to go for a smoke. Go to the end of the tunnel and go to the entrance of the tunnel, and this was fine, but because I didn't smoke, and thank God I didn't. And they would go outside and smoke, and one evening they were all outside smoking, and a shell was fired from Bataan, and it landed in the midst, and that was really terrible because we got some terribly injured people, our own people that were injured, because this shot was fired and landed right in the midst because they were outside smoking. Another good reason not to smoke. Excuse me. Well, things went from bad to worse, and finally they said, tomorrow tomorrow we will be surrendered. We will surrender tomorrow, and just give up, and there's no more. But the Japs will take care of us, and they'll let us take care of our patients, and we felt sure of this, you know. But this didn't happen. This didn't wasn't the way it worked. Really, they did not. They were not really all that concerned. And the first Japanese I saw was an officer who came through, and he was a doctor who was in charge of that section of a group that were going to take over part of the hospital. And he came through and examined every patient to make sure that they were not malingering or that there was some reason why they should be in bed. And that was fine, you know, because most of them were, if they were orthopedic patients, had broken bones and in traction or in casts and so forth, right there in the hospital. So we moved us, then he said we'll move this hospital to top side. Of course, Corregidor was on levels, you know, bottom side, middle side, and top side. We're going to move this up to top side tomorrow. And we went up there, and that's where the original hospital was, had been operating, and it had been bombed so severely that it was nothing but a shell of another building. And we took our patients, were moved up there, and we set them up. And it was, the only blessing was it was the dry season. Japs arranged it for that, you know. Of course, they couldn't have gotten any place if it had been the wet season, because when it rains, it's just a torrent. So we're in this place, and our patients, of course, we keep getting injured because the war was still going on, and then there was still combat. And some of the patients some more soldiers were being injured each day. And they'd come through. Now, General Wainwright was there, and I saw him several times, and he had his riding crop. He always had his riding crop, you know, because he was a horseman, a cavalryman. He was one of the last of the cavalrymen. And he'd walk through the hospital, and I've seen him many times. He'd walk through, and it's a real bad day and lots of vomit, and he'd say, "Oh, they're giving us hell today, aren't they?" Because he really was. That's a good word for it, because it was just, yeah, there was plenty of help every day. And go through this, see all these people being injured, you know, and wondering when in the war. Of course, our motto was "Help is on the way." We'd gone, it took us 29 days to sail. We were 29 days on ship to get there. But the next day we started looking toward the bay to see when they would be, because we just knew a fleet would be coming in to rescue us, you know. And we always had hope. We never gave up hope. And we had, some men had a radio that they would assemble and get news at night, you know, listen to the Voice of America and get the news. And said, FDR hates war, Eleanor hates war, and our sons hate war. And when things got really tough, we'd say that to each other. We'd say, FDR hates war, and I hate war. Anything for a laugh. And I say that we kept our faith, because we just knew that help would be there before long. We kept our faith, and we kept our sense of humor. And of course, we had our chaplains. Chaplain Robert Taylor was an East Texan. He and I had known each other before the war, and he was there, and he was such a rock, you know. He was there, and I could depend on him. He'd come around and see the patients, and he and I'd talk about East Texas, you know, what was going on, and I'd say, I'm hotter than, this is hotter than a peanut patch in East Texas in August, you know. And he always got a little fun out of that.
After the surrender, did you return to, you know, off the island onto the mainland along with your patients, or did they separate you from the hospital?
They separated us, but we were told then one night, now, wear your uniform, you know, wear your fatigues tomorrow, get dressed, because we're going to Manila. And we thought, well, this is just a pipe dream, you know, we're not going to Manila. But the next morning we were dressed and ready, and we went down. We had to walk down the mountain side to the pier where our ship was located. And we were loaded on the ship, and there was a Japanese officer who was in charge, and he had gone to school in UCLA, spoke beautiful English, and he served us tea and cookies on the way to Manila. So when we got there, they offloaded us onto trucks.
Wait. He served you tea and cookies? Oh, amazing.
Yes, it was. It was amazing. We couldn't believe it, but it was just part of the strange picture, you know. So,
How long was this after the surrender, or was it the night before?
It was the night before the surrender, because we were going to be surrendered the next day. And they did at noon the surrender, and I said the officer came through and examined all the patients to make sure none of them were pretending. And so, you know, it's just been so long, and I haven't thought about it much because I didn't want to think about it. But we just sort of took it all in stride and said, this is not really happening, you know, it's, I'm just having a dream. And it's just unbelievable when I look back on it now. But we were surrendered, and as I said, the Jap came through the wards and examined all the patients to make sure that they had real injuries, and most of them did, of course, because especially on my ward, which was orthopedic. And so many of them had casts and had broken bones and so forth. And so then that night when they told us, they said, our commanding officer said, be ready, tomorrow morning we're going to Manila. Or we're going to be taken off the island. Mm-hmm. And the next morning we had our fatigues on and our GI shoes, and we walked down the mountain, down the island. Of course, it's a rock, and it's just it's terrific walking conditions if you wanted to do that. And walked down to the pier where we would be sent, or we would get on the ship, and we did. We got on the ship, and as I said, as we went over, went toward Manila. This Japanese officer was there, and he served us tea and cookies. And we kept saying, where are we going? You know, well, you know, they didn't tell you anything. We knew better than to ask. We wouldn't get any information, but where are we going? But when we got to Manila, and they offloaded us, and we were on topside, and wounded from the hospital we watched them as they were loaded into the hold of the ship. And we were offloaded in Manila. Well, we nurses were loaded onto open trucks, and our patients we saw them take them out of the hold, you know, and so many of them, most of them were knitters, and they'd bring them out one at a time and put them on the truck, and then we started to leave the area. You know, the buses, the trucks were revved up, and excuse me, we are leaving Manila. Well, as we went out of the city, well, we were following the GIs. I mean, that bus with the wounded on it, and they turned off, you know, off the road, the street we were on, and our bus didn't follow them, and so we started yelling, "Oh, we have to go that way! We have to go that way!" with our patients, and no, we know where we're going, and they drove us to Santo Tomas, and Santo Tomas is an old university ground. It was the oldest university under the American flag. It was built in 1411, I believe, and it was just, we'd heard of Santo Tomas. We'd heard that it was an internment camp, and it had a terrible reputation. Please don't stand there.
Oh, well, we're not.
We didn't want to interrupt what you were doing.
Oh, no, that's
We're just
okay.
trying to get through. Sorry.
Are you coming through?
So No, there wasn't. They were just standing there staring at me, and I couldn't stand it. So they took us to Santo Tomas on in these open buses as we were driven through the streets of Manila. Of course, the Filipinos, if they could see us and the Japanese wasn't watching, well, they'd give us the Viva Victory sign. And that was really heartening to have them. We know that they were loyal, you know, and that they give us that sign as we went by. Of course, if there were no Japanese inside, but if the Japanese were there, they didn't do it. But they drove us into this university ground. It was the University of Santo Tomas. And of course, we'd heard about it, and we knew that it was an internment camp, but we kept saying, we don't belong here, you know, we have to go with our patients. We want to be with someplace else. But no, they no speaking English, so they kept us there for whatever they wanted to do. They had their orders, and we were just prisoners by this time and had no word to say. And so they drove us into Santo Tomas, and we said, we're not going to get off here because our patients are here. We're not going to get off here, but we did. And became an internee then in this civilian internment camp. And
I'm looking for something.
Oh,
To
I didn't recognize you.
close to keep the door open so when it opens, it doesn't close again.
Oh.
You know, why not? Doing good duty.
Where was I? We were quickly absorbed. We were quickly absorbed into Santo Tomas. We were assigned a room together. There were 14 of us nurses in one room. Of course, there were 54 of us at this point, 54 Army nurses. And there had been, when we were on Corregidor, some had been evacuated. They were being sent home. A plane came in to bring supplies, and they were going to let these go out. So there were 11 Army nurses that were sent out. Well, unfortunately, that plane had engine trouble down south, and they landed, and these nurses were left behind. They got off and were left behind. The plane got orders to proceed, and they were left behind. So there were 11 nurses down in the Southern Islands, and there were 54 of us who were captured on Corregidor. So 54 and 11 is 65, and there were 2 Army nurses up at the R&R station in North Luzon, and so there were 67 Army nurses who became POWs. And
It's just the door itself squeaks so terribly. And so if I just leave it open that much, people can come and go, and then we won't hear that squeak.
we all can, don't we?
I don't know. That in the end, Harriet can hear every word you're saying. So it's not going to interfere with that, but it's just distracting to have these little squeaky noises.
Sure it is. And there's enough distraction as it is.
Were you said 67 nurses and there were 3,000 internees.
Well, 3,000 to 5,000.
Oh, that's right. At times there were as many as 5. 67 nurses and 5,000 people.
And 3 doctors.
And 3 doctors. Is not an unreasonable.
And no medicine.
And no medicine. That's right.
But we did the best we could and did work with what we had. And we did not, I don't know how many, 4,000 or 5,000 internees, civilian internees in this camp. And of course there was a greater percentage of them were men because there were some older men who had gone out there after the 1898 when we took over the Philippines, 1898, and these men had gone out there, and a lot of them had married native women and had their home there. And well, they they were still Americans, so they had to be brought into the prison camp. And their wives, their families were left on the outside. And I said this university was just an old building, and it was great big stone buildings with classrooms. And I don't know where they got all these cots, but they had enough cots to set us up so each person could have a cot. And well, I didn't have a cot. They built a wooden bed, and the boards went a long ways, but they were about that far apart, you know. And my mattress was a bath towel because it's all I had. I covered that bunk bed with a bath towel, and that's where I slept for. And of course, we had to have mosquito nets because mosquitoes are prevalent and you get malaria. Of course, we had very little quinine in those days, and a lot of people were sick with malaria because they finally decided maybe that type of mosquito that was in that area didn't give you malaria, but a lot of people had malaria. And there were families in there, but they did not allow the wife and husband to live together. And this was God's blessing because sometimes they would sneak, and 2 or 3 women, 2 or 3 wives got pregnant, you know. And this was a terrible situation because without an adequate diet or without any diet at all, they couldn't very well have a healthy baby. But some of them, there were several pregnancies, and of course no prenatal care, no proper care for a pregnancy, you know. And so we set up, we Army nurses, we set up the hospital for the internees, and we had a men's ward and a women's ward, and that was it. And then there was another building they used for the pediatric children, the sick children. I didn't have to work there because I'm not a pediatric nurse, and we worked in the main hospital. Had, as I said, the wards were set up. One downstairs was a women's ward, and upstairs a men's ward. And we just worked long hours and did the best we could without any medicine. Of course, there was a lot that we could do.
Other than starvation, I mean, the fact that people just were very malnourished,
Yes.
and that you didn't have any medicines to cure people once they were sick or to fix them up. Did you see any evidence of abuse? I mean, were there people who were beaten and brought into your hospital?
No.
So the internees were punished through neglect.
That's right.
Certainly more.
There was no physical abuse. Now, we had the worst old Japanese commandant, Abiko was his name, and he was the most inhumane creature, you know. We had to bow to him from the waist and stay bowed until he passed by. If you saw him coming, you know, you bowed because he put out that edict, and we bowed to him as he passed by. And you bowed and you stayed bowed until he passed by. And if you didn't, he would have to just curse you and make all sorts of a scene. Well, as I say, things went from bad to worse, and of course they cut our supplies and they cut our food ration. We had, toward the end, we had fewer than 500 calories a day. And of course these weren't very strong calories. We had a lot of, we had dried beans, and once in a while I forgot a banana. It was such a treat. We ate the skin too. You peeled it, you washed it and peeled it. And they set up, they had built washing facilities outside in the area. A place where there would be a little tub and a spigot, you know, and you could go there and wash your own clothes, and then you had to lay them out on the grass and wait for them to dry, and you stayed right there with them because if you didn't, somebody would steal them. So it was a big problem to keep clean, to keep our
I understand that those people who lived in Manila, who had fair amount of wealth and had servants, had people who would bring things to them.
That's true.
But the nurses had no one at all. Did you have sort of angels? I mean, people who said, I'm going to share with you, or
That's
you
right,
can
we
come
did have- we
with our
had-
family.
An Army nurse had gone out there early in the century and married a German man. And so Miss Hubie was her name, Miss H-U-B-E. And she'd married this German, and so she was not interned because she was classified as an ally. You know, Germans and Italians were allies. And she was classified as an ally. And she was on the outside, and when she knew that we were in there, she sent us fruit twice a week. Some fruit and, well, any kind of food that could be sent, you know, as such, without a lot of refrigeration. And we got, Miss Hoover was an angel, and if it hadn't been for her, more of us would have suffered greatly, you know, because we got very little through the chow line, very little, but, and they had a chow line, they let the food line come in every day. Well, they let people bring the servants of these people who could afford it and were in there. And by the way, they started Santo Tomas when Manila was an open city, declared an open city in January of 42 or 43.
42?
42. It's an open city, and they said, you know, you can come to Santo Tomas to register, and they came there and didn't even bring a toothbrush. They were not allowed to go home. So they were in Santo Tomas, and of course those people that were wealthy enough, their servants came every day. We had a package line where people could come to the gate and bring stuff for certain people, you know. And so these people got food through the package line, and they did very well. And then Miss Hooby sent us stuff. It came through the package line twice a week. We got some fruit, and it usually was local citrus, which is wonderful because we don't have any vitamin C, you're in trouble. But citrus fruit, and then she did send us some female supplies, you know what I mean, which was just wonderful because we didn't have anything like that. And she was really an angel, and it was God's blessing that she was there, and that she hadn't.
The photos that I saw in the beginning when I started learning about this and seeing these photos, I was always sort of delighted to see these 1940s women wearing very short shorts. And I thought, well, that was rather nifty, you know, that these women looked like dance girls, you know, chorus line girls. But anyway, tell the story of why there were so many women wearing shorts.
Well, there's nothing else to wear. Nothing else to wear. They came, and of course they realized they were going to be under duress, you know, and they just brought what clothing they could. And of course you didn't want to be dressed up and wearing a nice skirt or a nice dress under these conditions. So I would say that's why they wore them. And I don't remember especially short shorts, but I guess if you say they were. But,
I guess maybe the scenes I'm thinking of are the women working in the garden.
Oh, yeah.
Also, this is, for the most part, Japanese footage or Japanese photos of Santo Tomas. And so maybe they were delighted with the women wearing shorts.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Of course, it would have been slanted if it was their photos. If it were their photos, and it was slanted to make them look they were doing the right thing.
Well, certainly to make it look like they were being very good to you.
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember? Oh, I thought you were going to read the ladder. Oh, the ladder. The story of the rope ladder.
Some of the citizens, men in the city, you know, their servants they finally stopped the food line at the front gate. They wouldn't let people bring it anymore because one man, there was a lot of communication that went on that they didn't want us to get any more communication. And so one day this man, you could just pass a note, and the censors read the note, and it said, today the news, today's news is in the mashed potatoes. So sure enough, they looked in that mashed potatoes, and there was a note about what had been going on. You know, it was news of the war because, as I said, these men had this radio, and they would assemble it at night and listen to the radio, and the next day they'd say, hey, did you hear the latest rumor? And they would tell you this rumor, and you just thought, well, it's a rumor, you know. But it was so good that you would hope it was true and sort of semi-believe it. But well, ask me another one.
The rope ladder.
Oh, the rope ladder. So this person, they said, we have some supplies and we will give them to you and we'll bring them to you at night if you can get them. So they built, they had this rope ladder, and I had it in one of these Hattie bags under my bed. And at night, I worked night duty. Helen Hennessy and I worked almost a year. We spent 1 year on night duty, and it was just good because you didn't have to talk to so many people, and it was a little quiet, you know, and you had a little peace and quiet because we were worked at night. And they would bring us some food if we could manage to get it, you know. So we had a signal, and I could go to the window in the evening, and if there was somebody out there, and if they held up a certain number of fingers, that meant the time that they would bring it, like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m., you know. And we had the signal, so and during the night, of course I was on night duty, and this was the end of the end of the hospital that was in that direction. And during the night, then I'd go there and I'd get the signal that they would have it there, and so sure enough they had it there, and I would go, and we had this rope ladder that over there they had these iron grills that are outside the windows. It's like a little, like a
little balcony or something.
A balcony, just window size, you know. And this rope ladder was built with hooks on it, and so I would put it on that and climb down. And I'm scared to death on the second floor balcony, but I was dark, and you know, and this meant food. So I would climb down this ladder and go over to the fence and get this bunch of supplies that the person would bring, and then come back, and I would tie this onto a rope, and my friend upstairs would pull it up, you know, and then I'd climb back up the rope ladder, and I hid this rope under this ladder under my bed. And so one day they were always inspecting us and looking for, they wanted to see what was going on, you know, and we'd hide things. We'd try to keep things secret, you know, but they would come through and inspect us. They would just go through our stuff. I mean, some of us had a suitcase, you know, and we still had some of our stuff in there, but they'd paw through it and just tear it all up. And I saw this, that we were having this inspection. I got up, because I was during the day, and I got up to go to the bathroom. When I came back, well, these people were going through my stuff, you know, and I thought, oh my goodness, here I am, I'll get killed yet. But they were searching the material. And they pulled this thing out from under my bed, this bag that had this rope ladder in it, and looked at it and put it back in and put it back under there. It didn't dawn on them what it was. It saved my life, I'm sure. Could no telling what would have happened if they had realized that I had this rope ladder. And we got a lot of supplies that way. We got some extra stuff that way. And they would send in brown sugar. We had brown sugar. We never had white sugar. And would be brown sugar and some cornmeal and some rice and you know, raw stuff, of course. We'd get this in this package, and it would be in the native bags. And I'd go out to the fence fence and get this and drag it over to the end of my ladder and then tie it something. And my friend upstairs would pull it up, you know. And of course, we shared it, and we gave it to people who had made arrangements to have it sent in. And some of it did get to the internees who could, it could be used for their general good, you know, but for the most part.
Did the camp manage to parcel out what food there was according to, well, to an extent needs, I mean, general and then maybe sick people and maybe young children? Was there any?
Try to. If they had, they didn't have any milk. There was no milk, but you know, did you ever have KLIM, Clem? Okay. We had that, and that was the milk we had. It was this powdered milk, KLIM, and
Special rations for children or for the sick?
And of course, the people in the hospital, if we, most people in the hospital were older, of course, because they just would give up and not be able to keep their strength up, and they would be in the hospital. And try to give them a little extra food, you know, as best we could. What we had would be partially out to the people who needed it most.
Did vitamin pills play a part in any of this? I mean, you'd think a bag of vitamin pills would be a lot more important than a bag of brown sugar.
That's true, but we didn't have them. There was no such thing. Now, Ms. Hoobie sent in some things like that. She would send in vitamin pills, and but if you took a B1, when you're hungry like that, you starve to death. It makes you so hungry that you starve. It wasn't worth taking it for, you know, even though you knew it was good for you. It wasn't worth taking because it'd make you so hungry, and there was no way to get food.
Do you have any stories about liberation?
Oh, it was wonderful, wonderful liberation. We kept saying, we had a loudspeaker system in camp, and they would try to give us what information they had. And so when we got the news that they had landed, the Americans had landed on Leyte, you know, the island of Leyte, the next morning our announcer said, help is on the way, and it's better late than never. This was a clue, you know. It's better late than never. And sure enough, it wasn't long until we, then of course we saw, it was September of '43 that we saw American planes. And they would come and bomb the area, bomb the pier area, you know, and there was activity around. And we were not supposed to look. The Japs would announce, this is, our planes are practicing their own maneuvers. Well, they weren't. We could see the stars and stripes on these planes, you know, but you're not supposed to look at them. Don't look at them because we're going to be firing something. You might get hurt. So really concerned about us, you know. We might get hurt. So we just didn't, well, we'd get in and do this and look out the window, you know, when we could see and hear these planes. And it just, that we called, the one, the Japanese had this yellow, they called it the rising sun. We called it the fried egg. You'd say, here's some with stars and stripes on them. These are not fried eggs. And it was wonderful to have those with the stars and stripes when we saw those in September of '43. And sure enough, it took a while because it's better late than never, and help is on the way, and FDR hates World War, and Eleanor hates World War. So things went from bad to worse, and toward the end, then it was really gruesome. And but we never gave up hope because we said tomorrow, or the next day, they will be here. And we never once gave up hope. And of course, they let us have religious services, but they would interrupt us. They'd come in, you know, while we were having church. and just make all sorts of noise with their hobnail boots and so forth, and say classy Americans, these classy Americans. But we kept the faith and continued. They let us have the church services as long as we could and did, you know. We did have some Army chaplains in there, and thank God they were faithful, you know, and kept our faith up.
Just
One nurse, we had a civilian nurse with us when they had sent the families back in after Pearl Harbor. They had sent the women and children back home, and this one nurse, she was a nurse, and so she stayed because she thought she could be of help because she was a nurse, and she was pregnant. So she was pregnant the whole time, you know, and had that baby in our prison camp. But so we said that he had 68 mothers, you know, because we all claimed him. He belonged to Billy, but he belonged to all of us, and we helped her rearing, you know. He grew up in there, and he's been up here every year. Usually he comes every year, and so one year when I brought one of the other girls, and I brought her up, and I said, "Now, Mickey, here's another one of your mothers, you know." And he liked that. He was so cute.
is this Rick Roth?
Rick Roth?
Rick Roth.
Is he not here?
He's not here this year. We thought he was coming.
He's always been present, and it's such a
68 mothers.
68 mothers. Yeah.
Okay, I think
Oh.
that's it.